But now we must, for you are tampering with a certain power that is not for mankind, namely that of atomic energy. A wonderful story, but unfortunately the secret diary has been definitive. Shown to be a fake. Taken into context, the embellishment of such details by the press could easily have served as the root of claims about not only a prehistoric oasis at the South Pole, but also the flying craft and eventually a secret Nazi base. Again, it seems likely that Byrd had been making a general statement about the potential uses of enemy aircraft during the coming decades, in the sense that a hostile nation should be enemy aircraft during the coming decades, in the sense that a hostile nation should be establish a base at one of the poles, might use the area as a centralized point for launching attacks against the US mainland. Indeed, Byrd had previously suggested that the US might wish to establish such a base at the North Pole. Hence it seems clear that he viewed the polar extremities as militaristically advantageous locations. Finally, Byrd's phrase, "in the case of a new conflict," seems to further indicate that his statements dealt not with any existing menace, but instead with the potential for a future threat by an enemy nation. With World War II still fresh in people's minds, many at the time shared concerns such as these. All speculation aside, what we are left with is very little ground for believing that Operation High Jump ended prematurely due to the presence of hidden subterranean races, attacks by woolly mammoths, or even Nazi flying saucers. Few would argue, however, that the various grains of truth pertaining to Byrd's historic operations have seeded themselves in the fertile grounds of myth and speculation, taking on a new and fascinating life of their own throughout the past several decades. One of the most significant researchers in this area is Micah Hanks, the author of Magic, Mysticism, and the Molecule. In his book, he presents his investigative analysis of ancient magical practices, mystical states, and out-of-body encounters through altered states of consciousness. Micah also explores stories of mythical animals and lands, and critically for our consideration of Operation Hijack, secret advanced technology. Micah is fascinated that there continues to be growing interest in Antarctica, and the talk of secret meetings being held there by US presidents, astronauts, and scientists. One of the more recent discussions circulates around the Antarctica, and the talk of secret meetings being held there by US presidents, astronauts, and scientists. One of the more recent discussions circulates around the discussions being held there by US presidents, astronauts, and scientists. One of the more recent discussions circulates around the discovery of an ancient civilization buried beneath the ice. A civilization that had a complex society. There have even been claims of frozen pyramids, photographs of which were published on the internet a few years ago. Dr. Mitch Darcy, a geologist at the German Research Center for Geosciences in Potsdam, said, "The pyramid-shaped structures are located in the Ellsworth Mountains, which is a range more than 400 kilometers long, so it's no surprise that there are rocky peaks cropping out above the ice. The peaks are clearly composed of rock, and it's just a coincidence that one particular peak has a pyramid-like shape. By definition, it is a nunatak, which is simply a peak of rock sticking out above a glacier or ice sheet. This one has the shape of a pyramid, but it doesn't make it a human construction. Pyramid-shaped peaks are very common. The Matterhorn in the Alps and Mount Olaustindrith in Iceland are notable examples. Though there are many hard facts here, they do not deter the hardline theorists. They continue to believe Antarctica is the home of a number of secret bases, when in reality, there's no advantage in having a secret base in Antarctica, because if there were, the world's governments would already have had a very public fight over it, and there is no evidence of that at all. Seemingly, all the South Pole is rich in is natural diversity and scientific opportunities, and long may it stay that way.
Antarctica remains the last fully unknown area of land on planet Earth. Buried under thick sheets of ice, we can only guess what secrets might reside beneath. Perhaps because of this, there are many conspiracies and rumors that swirl around the icy continent, many of which revolve around UFOs and an extraterrestrial presence there, one that various governments of the world may even be aware of. Maybe the best place to start would be a brief recall of the claims surrounding Operation Hijack. United States-led operation, which took place in early 1947 as they looked to establish a research base at the South Pole, at least officially. According to some research, following the transplantation of German engineers and scientists to the United States as part of Operation Paperclip in the aftermath of the Second World War, they had learned of an already established base of the Third Reich in the frozen world of Antarctica, a base, incidentally, that also had an alien presence. With an apparent cover story of wishing to establish a research base in place, the operation was led by highly respected naval officer Rear Admiral Richard Byrd, and it would be Byrd's own writings and testimony that would seemingly reveal the real reasons for the mission. On the afternoon of February the 19th, 1947, Byrd took to the skies for a reconnaissance flight over the frozen continent. However, according to his diary notes, flight entries and press conferences he would give in the days and weeks following the flight, instead of seeing thick, rugged sheets of ice, he found himself looking down on lush green vegetation, as well as mammoth-like beasts and other animals that he claimed shouldn't have been there. He would elaborate that he found himself looking at a huge opening, and that when he followed it, he found himself inside the Earth itself. It appeared he was flying over a huge city as he entered a mammoth cavernous opening. Then, things turned even stranger. Byrd claimed that something took over his plane, while at the same time, a voice came over the radio, bidding him welcome. It had, he recalled, a strong Nordic or German accent. He further noticed several round, circular-shaped objects approaching him. His plane was brought to land on the ground, and several tall, blonde-haired men approached his plane. His last flight note declared that a voice from outside his plane was ordering him to open the cargo doors. His last flight note declared that a voice from outside his plane was ordering him to open the cargo doors. According to what he would later tell the Chilean newspaper El Mercurio, he and his men were accompanied to a large building where they were served drinks unlike anything they had previously tasted. He then claimed to have met with representatives of a race that resided in the inner. Earth. They told him that they had been allowed to enter unharmed as they were aware of his noble character. He would further reveal that the atomic bombs dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima had created concern among their kind regarding the human race, and that they now felt compelled to intervene should such an event appear likely in the future. Perhaps most alarming of all, particularly in light of his statements that the inner race felt compelled to intervene in human affairs, was his claim, particularly in light of his statements that the inner race felt compelled to intervene in human affairs, was his claim that the United States, particularly in light of his statements that the inner race felt compelled to intervene in human affairs, was his claim that the United States, at incredible speeds. Whether we should take Byrd at his word or treat his claims with a pinch of salt remains open to debate. It is perhaps interesting, though, that he was hospitalized only days after his press conference, and what's more, despite his renowned reputation, he was never again allowed to speak publicly about his experiences again, at least in an official capacity. In his writings around a decade later, at least in an official capacity. In his writings around a decade later, Byrd would write that he had been ordered to remain silent on his encounter for the sake of humanity, while the claims that Richard Byrd were one of the first mysterious events surrounding Antarctica. One of the most recent is no less mysterious or thought-provoking. It occurred at some point in the late 1990s or 87. The presence of the vast lake under the sheets of ice was finally confirmed in 1993 after 3 decades of tests and experiments by both Russian and British scientists. What is further interesting about Lake Vostok is that scientists believe its environment is very similar to that on Europa, one of the main moons of Jupiter, and a celestial body that many believe could well harbour life. And it didn't take long for the scientists with an interest in studying Europa to turn their attention to the lake under Vostok Station. It also didn't take long for conspiracies and alleged leaked documents to find their way into the public domain. The general thrust of the claims are that a secret and ultra-specialized elevator was painstakingly installed through the thick ice, and eventually down to the environment merely abandoning the operation. They found a lot more than they were expecting. Padalka claims the team discovered a 14-armed octopus in the waters of Lake Vostok. This octopus was unlike anything they had previously seen, with the glass octopus being the closest comparison. According to Padalka, not only did this being seem to have superior intelligence to a standard octopus, it could paralyze a person with its venom from 150 feet away. Even more remarkable, it had the ability to change its form and mimic a number of other aquatic creatures. By the time the research team had realized it could also assume the form of a person and mimic the crew, it was too late to save one of the biologists from being ripped to pieces by this apparent alien life form. It was eventually captured, whereupon Russian military officers arrived at the base and confiscated it. Its whereabouts now is unknown, but rumblings among the crew were that these would be attempts to weaponize the alien DNA of the unsettling aquatic alien, which would ultimately lead Padalka to publicly reveal what he knew. There have, of course, been further claims of bizarre and suspicious goings-on over Antarctica as the 2000s have unfolded. Many people claim to have spotted as the 2000s have unfolded. Many people claim to have spotted facilities and even crashed UFOs using Google Earth, for example. And while some of these are more convincing than others, the other people claim to have spotted facilities and even he would state that he had in his possession video footage filmed in Antarctica by an American television crew from California who had been missing since 2002, a short time after the footage had been recorded. Gray put forward that video showed spectacular ruins of the frozen continent as well as an intense American military presence. What's more, this unit themselves appear to be engaging in archaeological activity at the site of the ruins. For their part, the military in the region denied any such activity or knowledge of the missing television crew. Gray, however, insisted there was a massive archaeological dig taking approximately 2 miles beneath the icy surface, and more importantly, the United States authorities were using every power they could to block the airing of the video, as it would clearly show this. What does this mean for the claims of Richard Byrd? Was his revelation more accurate and authentic than many people give him credit for? And has the human presence in Antarctica since the end of the Second World War not been one of purely scientific research, but one of using research as a shield to protect the few praying eyes that are in this part of the world from witnessing discoveries and revelations that would not only change human history, but possibly alter our own collective future? And above all else, just what are the ruins of these great cities? Who lived there and when? Might we find one day that beneath the icy blanket these cities are the ruins of Atlantis? Might the disaster that overtook the legendary civilization have been part of a pole shift that sent the continent suddenly hurtling across the Atlantic to the southern regions? Might the presence of this advanced alien civilization, Atlantean or not, explain the alleged pyramid of the enigmatic continent that resides near the United Kingdom-owned Princess Elizabeth Station. All of this is speculation, of that there is no doubt, but speculation that is surely warranted for such a mysterious, protected, and off-limits to most location, and speculation that will continue for the foreseeable future, or until the secrets of the seventh continent are revealed to all.
Kev, you know what your new Green Mountain commercial needs?
Don't say jingle.
A jingle. Rise and land for that old smooth.
All right, that's about it.
You probably want me to go. Right?
Yeah, all right.
Smooth Old Horizon Blend from Green Mountain Coffee Roasters.
Lives ruined, people dead.
Sounds riveting. Did you notice anything unusual?
I have a case to crack.
Stay out of police business.
Game on.
Unpublished 17th century AD alchemical documents reveal Sir Isaac Newton's private Egyptian pyramid studies in his quest to calculate a date for the end of days. In July 1936 AD, a metal chest surfaced at Sotheby's auction house in London filled with Isaac Newton's unpublished, private, handwritten papers and lab books. After economist John Maynard Keynes bought the treasure chest, he was shocked to find Newton was not only a force in mathematical theory, astronomy, and optics, but that he was also a clandestine esoteric theologist and an alchemist, questing otherworldly realms beyond physics with the assistance of supernatural forces. According to Sam Keynes, Newton, the last magician, the great man of science, was secretly Europe's leading alchemist, and believed his deepest universal insights came from his communications with ancient spirits. Having spent decades exploring the macro and micro mechanics of the universe, seeking a date for Armageddon, Newton is believed to have decoded it from the measurements and proportions of the legendary Solomon's Temple. But now, more unpublished papers reveal a key step in Newton's search for the date of Armageddon, the quest to find a hidden mathematical code within the dimensions of the Great Pyramid of Egypt. Isaac Newton's new papers worth a small fortune. Isaac Newton has always been the #1 primary icon for rational thinking, logic, and reason. So when his alchemical interests were first revealed, it was a great embarrassment to the scientific community, and it's happening again. The works revealing more of Newton's attempts to ascertain a date for the apocalypse are now being sold by Sotheby's and show his genius interpretations of the geometry, scale, and proportions of the Great Pyramid of Egypt. According to a report in The Guardian, Gabriel Heaton, Sotheby's manuscript specialist, says the papers take you remarkably quickly straight to the heart of a number of the deepest questions Newton was investigating. He added that the three papers are expected to fetch hundreds of thousands of pounds at auction next Tuesday. The Sotheby's antique specialist said Newton was trying to uncover the unit of measurement used by those constructing the pyramids, as he suspected it would disclose a microcosmic expression of the measure of the Earth. Isaac Newton, master of the universe. Newton studied the pyramids in the 1680s, but his real goal was to calculate the prime measurements of the biblical Temple of Solomon, in which he was convinced the date for the apocalypse was embedded. Heaton says the alchemist was looking for proof for his theory of gravitation, and he believed the secrets of ancient Egyptian alchemy would provide the required evidence. Building on Heaton's suggestion, a four-part series of research articles was published in 2016. In the first installment, Isaac Newton and the Temple of Doom, it was presented Newton's study of the Temple of Solomon, the Philosopher's Stone, and the Emerald Tablet. Newton believed the Emerald Tablet had alchemical Egyptian origins, and as he matured, it satisfied his theological thirst. The 10 magical lines of the tablet became a foundation for Newton's cosmological outlook and his developments of universal models. We would go so far as to suggest the Emerald Tablet actually inspired the alchemists' most famous universal laws. For example, line 10 of the Emerald Tablet says, "Its force is above all force, for it vanquishes every subtle thing and penetrates every solid thing." Pop culture tells us that Newton conceived the concept of gravity after an apple fell on his head. But read this 10th line again, and you'll see how succinctly and clearly the sentence describes gravity, which is defined by modern science as the force that attracts a body towards the center of the Earth or towards any other physical body having mass. In a letter dated 1704, which is currently on display at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, Newton explained that after 30 years of analyzing the measurements, ratios, proportions, and architectural features in ancient buildings, he had unearthed a secret number system within the biblical books of Daniel and the Revelations. And from his secret code, he declared the prophetic year 2060 AD as the date for Armageddon, the end of days. But just how many of his paradigm-shifting scientific achievements resulted from his quest for the Philosopher's Stone and his translation of the Emerald Tablet of Hermes? While Isaac Newton was regarded a towering sentinel of the scientific method on a global platform, he was secretly a deeply mystical, magical, and animistic thinker. The Newton Project website provides scans of papers written by John Maynard Keynes, offering researchers insights into Newton's inner thoughts. For example, the universe was a cryptogram sent by the Almighty. Newton set out to read the riddle of the Godhead, of past and future events divinely foreordained, and according to Keynes, Newton turned to the early philosophical works of the 16th century European intellectuals who formed the mystical secret society, the ancient mystical order Rosicrucis, better known as the Rosicrucians. Deeply religious and anti-Catholic, just like Newton, the Rosicrucians strive to create a liquid called the elixir vitae, and substance called the Philosopher's Stone, required to produce limitless amounts of gold. Michael White's 1999 book, Isaac Newton, The Last Sorcerer, tells us Newton owned 169 books on alchemy, including a highly annotated English translation of Thomas Vaughan's Rosicrucian Manifestos, The Fame and Confession of the Fraternity R.C., and the Themis Aurea by Michael Mayer, a classic early work on the origins of Gnosticism and the Rosicrucian movement. A quote by Keynes, published in Sir Isaac Newton, The Last Sorcerer, perfectly summarizes the importance Newton assigned to alchemy in his quest for unusual truths. Newton was motivated by a deep-rooted commitment to the notion that the alchemical wisdom extended back to ancient times. The city of Heraklion, home of the temple where Cleopatra was inaugurated, was swallowed by the Mediterranean Sea off the coast of Egypt nearly 1,200 years ago. It was one of the most important trade centers in the Mediterranean before it sank more than a millennia ago. For centuries, the existence of Heraklion was believed to be a myth, much like the city of Atlantis is viewed today. But in 2000, the underwater archaeologist Frank Goddio finally found the sunken city after extensive underwater research in today's Abu Qir Bay. Before this modern-day discovery, Heraklion had been all but forgotten, relegated to a handful of inscriptions and phrases in ancient texts by the likes of Strabo and Diodorus. The Greek historian Herodotus, 5th century BC, writes of a great temple that was built where the mythological hero Heracles, or Heracles, first set foot in Egypt. He also claimed that Hellenoi and Paris visited the city before their famous Trojan War. 4 centuries after Herodotus visited Egypt, the Greek photographer Strabo noted that the city of Heraklion was located to the east of Canopus at the mouth of the River Nile. The underwater archaeologist Frank Goddio is known as a pioneer of modern maritime archaeology. Goddio founded the European Institute for Underwater Archaeology, IEASM, in 1987, with the aim to explore and research underwater archaeological sites. IEASM is known for having developed a systematic approach using geophysical prospecting techniques on underwater archaeological sites. By exploring the area,
I work from home, so bundling Spectrum, internet, and TV has been super important for our family.
I do online work. I also do remote programming.
Our bills have been affordable, can't complain.
Fast, reliable internet starting at $30 a month. Supply your whole job with one delivery. The Home Depot delivers orders of any size directly to your job site. Service you expect. Service your business deserves.
This is zero sugar. The don't eat the whole bag rule still applies.
La Roche-Posay UV Pro Sport. Feel the heat, not the burn. Advanced UV protection for high-intensity activities. Stays put while you're active. Dermatologist tested, professional athlete approved. La Roche-Posay.
in parallel straight lines at regular intervals, the team can identify anomalies on the sea floor, which can then be explored by divers or robots. This research allowed them to understand the topography and circumstances that caused submersion of the area over time. The team used information from historical texts to establish the areas of primary interest. The survey of Abu Qir Bay covered a research area of 11 by 15 kilometers, 6.8 by 9.3 miles. Beginning in 1996, the mapping of the Abu Qir Bay took years. In 1999, they discovered Canopus, and in 2000, they discovered Heraklion. The site of the sunken city of Heraklion remained hidden in the Bay of Abu Qir for so long because the remains of the ancient city are covered with sediment. The upper layer of the seafloor is made up of sand and silt deposited as it exits the River Nile. The team from IEASM was able to locate remains by creating detailed magnetic maps, which provided the evidence needed to finally pinpoint the location of Heraklion. now submerged under the waters of the Mediterranean Sea. In its heyday, Heraklion was located at the mouth of the River Nile, 32 kilometers, 20 miles, to the northeast of Alexandria in ancient Egypt. The enormous city was an important port for trade with Greece, as well as a religious center, where sailors would dedicate gifts to the gods. The city was also politically significant, with pharaohs needing to visit the Temple of Amun to become universal sovereign. Using cutting-edge technology and in collaboration with the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities, IEASM managed to locate, map, and excavate the ancient sunken city of Heraklion, which was found at 10 meters, 32.8 feet, below the water and 6.5 kilometers, 4 miles, from current day coastline in the west of Abu Qir Bay. After removing 0.5 kilometers, 4 miles, from current day coastline in the west of Abu Qir Bay. After removing a layer of sand and mud, divers uncovered the extraordinary, well-preserved city with many of its treasures still intact. These include the main temple of Amun-Gur, giant statues of pharaohs, hundreds of smaller statues of gods and goddesses, a sphinx, 64 ancient shipwrecks, 700 anchors, stone blocks with both Greek and Egyptian inscriptions, dozens of sarcophagi, gold coins, and weights made from bronze and stone. Among the remains of the once great city, the underwater archaeologists discovered an enormous 5.4 meter, 7.7 feet statue of Hapi, the god dedicated to the inundation of the Nile. This was one of 3 colossal red granite sculptures discovered dating back to the 4th century BC. In 2001, the team also discovered an ancient stele originally commissioned by Nectanebo I, sometime between 300 and 360 BC, complete with detailed and clearly readable inscriptions. The inscriptions on this ancient stele allowed the archaeologists to determine that the ancient cities of Thonis and Heraklion were in fact one of the same, Thonis being the name used originally by the Egyptians, and Heraklion being the ancient Greek name. From then on, the ancient sunken city was known as Thonis Heraklion, and Heraklion being the ancient Greek name. From then on, the ancient sunken city was known as Thonis Heraklion. Spectacular photographs of the discovery and recovery process reveal numerous statues and structures that once were tall and mighty and great. One photo is a Greco-Egyptian statue of the Ptolemaic queen, which stands eerily on the seabed, surrounded only by sediment and darkness, while another photograph shows the face of a great pharaoh peering up out of the sand. In an interview with the BBC in 2015, Frank Godio explained the policy of the IEASM underwater excavations was to learn as much as we can by touching as little as we can and leaving it for future technology. At that point, around 2% of the site had been excavated. The clay sediment from the Nile, which is in the ancient city for so long, also acts to protect the artifacts on the sea floor from the sea water. In the case of artifacts which are removed from their hidden underwater sanctuary, IEASM takes a great deal of care to restore and preserve them on board their ships and in laboratories. In some cases, this has taken days, but in others, such as that of the enormous Hapi statue, this took 2.5 years. Built on the Nile Delta, the city itself was traversed by a vast network of canals and was said to be stunningly beautiful. Dubbed the Venice of the Nile, Heraklion was at one point the largest port in the Mediterranean. Explorations of the site have concluded that the city probably gradually declined in importance as it slipped into the sea during the second half of the 8th century AD. This begs the question of why such a significant city was lost. The causes include a series of geological phenomena and cataclysmic events. IEASM joined forces with other institutions to conduct geological research, which has shown that the southeastern basin of the Mediterranean was affected by slow subsidence, the rise in sea levels, and local phenomenon related to the constitution of the soil in the area, which together formed the conditions for cities such as Heraklion to sink into the sea. In In 2005, IEASM attained permission from the Egyptian authorities who owned the artifacts to arrange a touring exhibition of the artifacts discovered. The resulting exhibition, entitled Egypt's Sunken Treasures, toured major cities in Germany, Spain, Italy, and Japan. The exhibition at the Grand Palais in France averaged a record of 7,500 visitors per day. The British Museum joined forces with Frank Gaudio in 2015 to arrange its first underwater archaeology exhibition, which included about 200 artifacts discovered off the coast of Egypt by IEASM between 1996 and 2012. By then, Gaudio estimated that they had explored only about 5% of the ancient city of Heraklion, estimated to cover an area of about 3.5 square kilometers, 1.3 miles. According to the art newspaper, Gaudio stated that this would be a big undertaking on land, but under the sea and under the sediment, it's a task that will take hundreds of years. To understand the scale of this task, Heraklion is about 3 times the size of Pompeii, and archaeologists have been excavating that particular catastrophic site for over 100 years. The exhibition at the British Museum, entitled Sunken Cities, Egypt's Lost Worlds, was also presented at the Institut du Monde Arabe in Paris in 2015 and at the St. Louis Art Museum in the United States. Its last stop was the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts up until January 2021, before the artifacts returned to Egypt. The discovery of Heraklion raises important questions about whether so-called mythical cities exist in reality. If a city once believed to be a myth can be uncovered from the depths of the sea, who knows what other legendary sunken cities of the past will be uncovered in the future? Only time will tell. The mysterious site of Abu Ghurab, Egypt, was a sun temple and a funerary complex. Indeed, the site contains the only complete sun temple ever discovered. But according to some researchers, there are more mysteries to be discovered at Abu Ghurab. They insist that the blocks used to build some monuments at the site could only have been levitated into position using ancient advanced technology involving acoustic roots, a technique which has since been lost. It's generally believed by Egyptians that the Egyptian cult temple of the Old Kingdom were based on the cult of the sun god Re at Heliopolis, which meant that they were probably open in plan and lacking a shrine. Sun temples were unique among the ancient Egypt cult temples, as worship was centered on a cult object, the benben, a short obelisk placed in full sunlight. The benben was the name of the divine stone at Heliopolis, associated with an old Egyptian verb which meant to rise. According to the pyramid text from the Old Kingdom, this stone was a manifestation of the primeval god Atum, when he rose out of the primeval waters of Nun. According to another interpretation, it represented the primeval hill on which Atum first landed. The stone itself was conical in shape, kept in the most sanctuary of the house in Heliopolis, called the House of the Benben. The building of the sun temples was the result of a gradual rise in the importance of the sun god. During the Old Kingdom, Ra became essentially a state deity. Among the few temples surviving from the Old Kingdom are sun temples of the 5th dynasty kings at Abu Ghurab.
Goldilocks needs a place of her own, and fast. Thankfully, she's on Redfin. They update their listings every 2 minutes. And with so many options, she's bound to find a good shop.
This one's just right. Is she meeting? Yes.
Oh, it's happening. It is happening.
Online security is like one of the very highest priorities. With Spectrum, I don't have to worry about it. When my kids are on their devices, they are protected.
Fast, reliable internet, starting at $30 a month.
Americans, we can do anything we want, except one thing. We just can't stop being American. Nothing. America, except one thing. You just can't stop being American. Nothing stops America, and nothing stops Ram.
My name is Detective Inspector Paul.
I think this might have been a murder.
Yes, fun.
Rough edges. Abu Ghraib, Arabic for father of angels. Abu Ghraib, Arabic for father of angels. Abu Ghraib, Arabic for father of angels, is an ancient built in that period. But only the Eurosat King found excavated. Near Sarah, meaning possess raised power. That was better to do, as it was constructed high stone years before purpose. They say a structure so a pyramid of Riga by travellers to visit. They went too far into the as newer say pyramid mortuary complex and a architect. The sample of Ghraib is one of only two kingdoms known to survive, although it's believed that many others existed and were destroyed. Have not. The town consisted of a large courtyard, the edge of the desert, surrounded by small rooms, cult chambers, and an altar. The upper temple is 60-foot high pedestal supporting a 108-foot obelisk. A symbol of the sun god was built east, directly in front of the obelisk in the court open to the sun. This altar was constructed of 5 huge white alabaster blocks arranged to form a symbol meaning Ra is satisfied. Along the covered passage approached the opening Nile River valley, decorated with beautifully sculptured and painted scenes from the Old Kingdom, around 2575 to 213 BC. The which Neoseus temple with the obelisk stood very small. The summit had been extended before the temple's construction with a system of artificial terraces. The temple itself has a rectangular layout with an east-west orientation defined by an enormous periphery wall built of limestone rocks. About a quarter of the temple was a large open court located in the southeastern area, while the eastern quarter consisted of a series of storage chambers and an oak space, referred to by Ludwig Borchardt, who excavated the site in 1898 and 1901 as the Great Slaughterhouse. German Egyptian architect Borchardt became famous for his excavations in Abu Ghraib and also at Amarna, where he discovered the famous bust of Nefertiti. He christened the area the Great Slaughterhouse due to the fact that he discovered a number of large alabaster basins here. These objects were circular bowls, about 9 feet in diameter, carved out of roughly cubed blocks, positioned one after another in such a way that the blood of sacrificed animals could flow freely down them. However, there is another more extreme theory as to what the 9 circular alabaster basins were used for. One or two researchers have suggested that they may have been used to levitate objects through the vibration of the water. The proposal, among various extreme pyramids, was put forward in the 2009 series Pyramid Code by Dr. Con Bolter. He says regarding pyramids around the world, it seems that there was some kind of worldwide pyramid building effort to tens of thousands of years, because they're not all the same style, and there are some modern ones, relatively more modern. So I think we're saying that we're looking for Atlantis and everything that went into it, then all the pyramids on the planet become relevant. In the documentary, we're introduced to an Egyptian tour guide and writer who says, 1936, 1937, the Sphinx was cut to the neck in hand. This was my playground. There were in sometimes because it's narrow. At Abu Ghurab, we have a crystal altar, a round disc in the middle, a 4 radial line, the symbol of Hotep, and the word Hotep means east and food. This fresco is lit on a shaft about 180 feet deep, to the level of the ocean, so running water in there. In the area, these giant concave quartz instruments are not found in a line like you see them today. 9 of them found around the area, and the small found. Then we have the oldest obelisk created in Egypt. Next to that altar, what's it of the hieroglyph writing. That is Sufi writing at the obelisk, depicting the disk of the sun, the word saying the heart of the sun, Ibra. Adherents of such theories point out that the view of the basins from above reflects the ancient Sanskrit mandala of a circle within the square, while the machinicular concavities suggest a complex mechanical purpose that has not yet been identified by modern Egyptologists or any independent researchers. According to researcher Alex Putney goes to say regarding the alabaster basins, the identical dimensions and curvature of the eastern basins, with perfectly rendered geometric form, the appearance of having been serially manufactured through mold-making processes rather than being carved in solid state. Abundant evidence of this fact is not for close to 30 years by much of the academic community, despite publications in journals. The makeup of the stone basins at Abu and the stone basins at Abu and the stone used in the construction of the pyramids of Giza, the levitation techniques will be employed in ancient Egypt. The specific and exclusive use of piezoelectric, the makeup of the stone basins at Abu and the stone used in the construction of the pyramids of Giza, the levitation techniques will be employed in ancient Egypt. The specific and exclusive use of piezoelectric calcite and core crystals for the construction of the pyramids themselves and the large basins that once surrounded. The specific and exclusive use of piezoelectric calcite and core crystals for the construction of the pyramids themselves and the large basins that once surrounded them in great numbers relates to their transducive capacity to focus and amplify acoustic surrounded them in great numbers. Relates to their transducive capacity to focus and amplify acoustic waves. Mechanical flexing occurs in the quartz and calcite crystals as a uniform structural deformation that generates standing waves with the stone's crystalline lattice, eventually building a strong electromagnetic field that allows acoustic levitation. Putney and others point out that there is no evidence that these basins are used in the ritual sacrifice, as some academics believe. In this, at least, it is a fact that the temple has yielded no physical evidence characteristic of slaughterhouses, such as animal bones or flint knives. So it seems that rather than slaughterhouses, these spaces must have had some other use. The Egyptologists now believe that the alabaster basins were actually used for ritual purification of offerings, which then could be conveyed to the altar to the sun god. Alex made such relatively simple explanations. The result of academics is not thinking big enough. The hieroglyph inscription of the obelisk at Abu Ghurab reads, Heart of the Sun, in reference to the pyramid network's piezoelectric transduction of the infrasound resonance of the sun at the 1.45 Hz frequency of the human heart at rest, where the pyramid is responsible for the regulation of global heartbeat patterns and weather patterns. The Gendera Temple complex, located about 37 miles off Luxor on the west bank of the River Nile, is one of the best preserved collections of ancient monuments in Egypt. Contained inside the complex is the superb Temple of Hathor, founded in 54 BC by Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XII. On the walls of one of the crypts underneath this temple are a series of relief carvings, sometimes known as the Dendera lamps, because of their resemblance to light bulbs. Walls of one of the crypts underneath this temple are a series of relief carvings, sometimes known as the Dendera lamps. resemblance to light bulbs, sometimes known as the Dendera lamps, because of their resemblance to light bulbs. The vast Dendera complex covers an area of 400 meters, sometimes known as the Dendera lamps, because of their resemblance to light bulbs. The vast Dendera complex covers an area of 400 meters. The vast Dendera complex covers an area of 400 meters, 560 feet, and is by mud enclosure wall. The complex made to the Ptolemaic 35 BC and 30 BC, 8900s, though the builder replied much older temples on names. The Dendera complex contains a range of monuments, including the Hathor Temple, the birth of Isis, a sacred lake, various temples, Roman kiosks, and a Christian church. The earliest surviving building on the site is the Musi, a large granite shrine built next to the second, constructed over a period of years from 54 to 20 BC during the reign of Ptolemy the 12th, and also famous Queen Cleopatra. Along the Ptolemy Temple of Horus, along the Ptolemy Temple of Horus, sandstone temple of Hathor, dedicated to the goddess of Hathor, the consort of the falcon god, goddess of motherhood and music. Famous Dendera zodiac relief, phenomenon. Hathor, the consort of the falcon god, goddess of motherhood and music. Famous Dendera zodiac relief, phenomenon. Representation of the stars of the fourth Egypt. Dendera zodiac relief, phenomenon. Representation of the stars of the fourth Egypt was found in the temple of Thor, adorning the ceiling of the second Osiris, one of the dedicated Egyptian god of the underneath the floors of the ceiling of the second Osiris, one of the dedicated Egyptian god of the underneath the floors of dedicated Egyptian god of the underneath the floors of four trips to reveal sometimes forces. These subterranean rooms were used for occult equipment, archives, and magical emblems with a protection. And so the numerous Jews kept in the crypt was that of the bar of Thor, the bar was believed to be being's personality, and was depicted as a bird or a bird with a human head. Access to the crypt came from hidden trapdoors floor and secret doors in the walls. Subterranean crypts were a common feature in Egyptian temples from the late period 664 to 55 BC onward. However, in crypts and temples, 11 of those in that temple contain relief carvings. 3 of the relief carvings in the easternmost 5 crypt on the southern side that have caused such a debate in fringe archaeology circles. One of these controversial reliefs shows us holding an elongated bulb object containing snakes, which is supposed to be a diagram, a symbol resembling a collar with a broad and capital divided by 4 parallel bars, with 2 human arms. A huge baboon demon holding 2 knives in his hands is depicted to the right. Although Egyptologists interpret these images as representing lotus flowers adorning a snake, some researchers have other explanations and meaning. In their 1996 book, The Lot of Arrows, Austrian monument theorist Prasser and Reinhard Habe conjectured that the snake inside the lotus flower represented light bulbs. They suggest that in the reliefs, the snake represents the electric current. The lotus flower of the circuit of the bulb, the lotus bulb, and the dyed pillar, the isolator, traps the electric current. The lotus flower of the circuit of the bulb, the lotus bulb, and the dyed pillar, the isolator. Prasser and Habeck believe that due to the previous of the wood, some form of light would have been required, and as there are apparently no traces of sin, Prasser and Habeck believe that due to the previous of the wood, some form of light would have been required, and as there are apparently no traces of sin in the room, this must be an electrical lighting system. This kind of alternative explanations for ancient would be complete without an appearance by the granddad of ancient astronaut theories, Eric von Däniken. In the case of twins, there was evident extraterrestrial contact in ancient Egypt from 1996. Von Däniken opinions of Prasser and Habeck that the Dendera release illustrate an ancient bulb, adding back the image of the baboon, a warning of the electrical device dangerous if used incorrectly. He also states in the relief is located in a secret chamber. In 1981, Viennese electrical engineer Wolfgang constructed a model based on the roof of the Temple of Hathor, complete with dicolumn insulator, bulb, and twisting wire, with stimulation and emitted light. So we can interpret these images as an error that prove the ancient Egyptians used electricity like their underground tombs and crypts, and were thus in possession of incredibly advanced technology thousands of years ago. The first basic objection to the theory that these ancient reliefs depict electrical lamps is that an electric light bulb does not need an extra insulator. The diode, the glass of the light bulb insulates the filament. Secondly, no material evidence has ever been found, despite hundreds of years of investigations and excavations in Egypt. Not a trace of associated artifacts or supporting technology, such as wires, power supplies, that would be required to manipulate electricity. Thirdly, the assertion made by Prasser and Habeck no trace of soot have ever been found in Egypt's numerous underground tombs, pyramid shafts, and crypts is completely untrue. Soot is there in abundance on the burial chamber walls of the Red Pyramid of Deshur. For example, in other cases, such as the walls of Passus and the Great Pyramid of Giza, for example, decoration was undertaken in daylight before the ceiling and roof were installed. Furthermore, even a perusal of the Dendera reliefs shows that they are in fact covered in soot. The original white colour of limestone still visible around the edges of the block. How do we interpret these enigmatic reliefs? Although it is not known exactly what the diode represents, its hieroglyphic meaning is enduring ability and sometimes column. The diode pillar has also been interpreted as a combination of the four pillars that the Egyptians believed supported four corners of the earth, as a cedar tree, with branches as the backbone of the god Osiris. Its leaf of corn is as the backbone of the god Osiris. Its leaf of corn, it may have represented all these things at various times during ancient Egyptian history. Egyptian pyramids and tombs display the diode symbol in their decoration. Include Sefu's step period at Medium, 62 miles south of Cairo, the diode pillars from columns supporting the sky, and in Diosa step pyramids at Cairo from columns supporting the sky, and in Diosa step pyramids at Cairo, with pyramids at Cairo, with diapers supporting the above. As a depict diode pillar, and a lotus and a fire giving birth sacred time and culture. One of the 21st century's main obsessions is with technology, which is why being objects that are imperfectly, only partially understood, are thought to be machines of some kind that show that our ancestors were just as advanced as we are today. Unfortunately, this attitude tells us absolutely nothing about ancient cultures. Things are that show that our ancestors were just as advanced as we are today. Unfortunately, this attitude tells us absolutely nothing about ancient cultures. Things are artifacts, but evidence us that generally must be understood in ancient Egyptian religion, and maybe not in technology. This seems to be a bit of a magical to technical process. River, almost 4,175 miles, crosses the countries throughout Africa, is widely regarded as the longest river in the world. While all of this might be considered common knowledge, the winding waters of a famous river have many intriguing facts that you might not know. Here are 10 of the most fascinating facts about the Nile River. Without the Nile, the ancient Egyptian civilization may never have existed. The Nile River was the source by the ancient Egyptians and played a vital role in the country. Country's history and culture. The river was also a very important factor in the socio-economic development and ancient Egypt. Without the River Nile, the great ancient civilization may never have existed. Central fall was almost not a factor in the socio-economic development and ancient Egypt. Without the River Nile, the great ancient civilization may never have existed. Central fall was almost non-existent in Egypt. The river was the only source of moisture to sustain crops. The resource of the Nile River remains unknown. Some might tell you that Lake Victoria, Africa's main lake, is the source of the River Nile. Others say that the Kagera River and its tributary, the River Fugu, having its headwaters in Burundi, is the real source. The truth is, however, that the River Nile remains a mystery to this day. The Nile Highway was a highway.
A man who works hard, sweats hard. Old size swag, so Coach thought I was lacking. So I trained with my old size and I became the best player ever. Sometimes I was lacking. So I trained with my old size and I became the best player ever. Sometimes also cup and sweat. Nearly looking for close everything, but where to start?
Realtor.com. With Real Commute, it's easy to find a home close to what's close to your heart. Do y'all resign? Realtor.com.
Vacation isn't over. You say it's
Why buy at Courage Kia? Every new car comes standard with the Courage Kia in it. Courage selection over 120 new Kias in stock. Come see for yourself at CourageKia.com. Courage Kia, the home of no fear pricing.
You know what your new Green Mountain commercial needs?
Say
a jingle. Round it for that. All right. You probably want me to go. Right? Yeah. All right.
Smooth bold horizon for Green Mountain coffee roasters.
That joined the country together as essential for trade and transportation. Until the 19th century, travel by land was virtually unknown in the region. Ships and boats were the main means of transporting people and goods around the country. Other than providing water, the Nile offered an excellent soil for food, which is the main reason why so many Egyptians lived near it. Locals used spears and nets to catch fish and trap different birds that flew close to the surface of the water. Such of what we know of Egypt comes from a Such of what we know of Egypt comes from a plethora of records. We have Iris, Such of what we know of Egypt comes from a plethora of records. We have Iris, who was responsible for providing this papyrus. Ethiopians a torrent of water called the banks of the river Nile in Egypt to overflow in this flat desert. Ethiopians a torrent of water called the banks of the river Nile in Egypt to overflow in this flat desert, causing massive floods every year. The reason why it doesn't flow is because the construction of the Aswan High Dam flow in this flat desert, causing massive floods every year. The reason why it doesn't flow is because the construction of the Aswan High Dam in the 1960s. Until the Aswan High Dam, the early inundation of Nile happened between June and September in a season the Egyptians called Akhet, the inundation. This was seen by Egyptians as the coming of the deity Hapi, bringing fertility to the land. The goddess of the flood, the goddess had wept the great flood. Despite Hapi being the local deity in a way, bringing fertility to the land, the goddess of the flood, the goddess had wept the great flood. Despite Hapi being the local deity in a way, the god most closely associated historically and culturally with the Nile was Iris, who was killed by his brother Seth on the riverbank and then became the king of the underworld. For that reason, the Nile River was an important part of Egyptian spiritual life as well. His brother Seth on the riverbank and then became the king of the underworld. For that reason, the Nile River was an important part of Egyptian spiritual life as well. For that reason, the Nile River was Paul's brother Seth on the riverbank and then became the king of the underworld. For that reason, the Nile River was an important part of Egyptian spiritual life as well. The Egyptians believed that this was the passageway between life and death. The West was considered the place of death. The West was considered the place of death, since the sun god rose in the West each day. Ancient Egyptians practiced on the river sport. The West was considered the place of death, since the sun god rose in the West each day. Ancient Egyptians practiced on the river sport. Showed that vessels held as men, each one wielding a long pole, that the crew used to maneuver the boat and upright, wheeling their poles off their respective boats. Crocodiles have been living in the deltas for thousands of years, and they don't really like it too close. They attack humans regularly, usually for washing clothes or fishing a door. It's estimated that there are 200 attacks a year from Nile crocodiles in Africa. After a long period of speculation, a team of Polish archaeologists has discovered the functions of almost 100 monumental structures across the Nile, which looked between the 4th and 6th centuries AD across an area of approximately 500 kilometers from today's south of Egypt to central Sudan. Defensive structures served as refuges for the local population who could gather aside behind the safety of the high walls during times of unrest. According to PAP, the project led by Bogdan Zuraski, head of nubiology at the Institute of Mediterranean and Oriental Cultures, was subsidy granted by the Foundation for Polish Science to investigate structures in the context of the formation of the Christian kingdoms in the valley of the Middle Nile. He said, archaeological landscape of Egypt is dominated by the pyramids, and Sudan by stone defensive structures from time just before, and just after the Christianization of pagan kingdoms in the mid-6th century, they were literally all over the whole valley of the Middle Nile. These defensive structures were built 20 to 30 kilometers apart, and between them observation towers were placed. According to the researchers, some of the ramparts were a few meters wide and a few meters high, and were made of mud brick or stones, or sometimes a combination of both. The blocks were bonded with mud mortar and several pieces of shears, plastic bases that stone distances up to 100 meters. But as well as their military functions, the researchers found evidence that the monuments also have a few function. The lack of homes around monuments also points. Regarding the discovery, he said, the scale is unbelievable. After last research season, we're seeing that the majority of the fortresses team studied as refugees. We're seeing that the majority of the fortresses team studied as refugees, which means that in times of unrest, the monument was clear. The wall did not contain course and was quite thin compared to us in this period. It didn't even have a function. However, after a walking there, researchers unearthed 16 bands of stone stairs leading to the top of the wall, which would have allowed quick access to the top of the wall to take defense action, confirming that this monument was indeed used for defense. The researchers commented on the fact that the brick building of the period was usually the church to take defensive action, confirming that this monument was indeed used for defense. The researchers commented on the fact that the brick building of the period was usually the church. Professor explained that in medieval mentality, the church was always a search for protection. The church was always a search for protection. Chroniclers testify to the wonderful divine providence in defense of the war. Discovery in 1922 of the old tomb of the boy in the 21st century. Indeed, of Tutankhamun has become the popular image of Egyptian civilization. This Tutankhamun created a worldwide sensation. Stories spread about a curse on anyone who dared to break their tomb. There's apparent claims connected to this discovery, of whom suffered death by violence, or in all circumstances, the reason to play the curse, of whom suffered death by violence, or in all circumstances, the reason to play the curse, including ruled from his Memphis to the south of Cairo and married his sister and Essen Parton. They had two children born. Was Pharaoh Tutankhamun broken with religious temples, including Amun, and worship and also reestablished as the capital of Egypt. When he was around 8 years old, Tutankhamun died unexpectedly as a result of malaria and an infected broken leg from a fall from his chariot. Recently, theory suggested by Houghton Ashrifian, surgeon at Imperial College, is that he suffered from capital and that his by led to 20 BC to operate in a sponsored by American lawyer Ian Davis, offered November 22. Carter and the team discovered a doorway with Royal Seal going the Jackal Hay Pod, and a doorway with Royal Seal going the Jackal Hay Pod, and a bit blinding of 90s. Carter knew he was on the verge during the magnificent and to he was known sending a cable to Lord Carver in England, which must have made his heart up. Last, had made one discovery of Valley, a magnificent two seals intact, recovered same for your arrival. Congratulations. November the 26th, Carter discussed second doorway was the first similar seal impressions. Able to restrain himself, ever made a hole at the top of the doorway and using a candle looked inside Christ's diary what he saw. It was some time before one could see the hot air and caused the candle to flicker, but as soon as one's eye became accustomed to the glimmer of light, with the light of an electric torch as well as an indescribable with the light of an electric torch as well as an indescribable from the cloak of art, this in strange form, and headed, and beast in fell, explicitly painted from the cloak of art, this in strange form, and headed, and beast in fell, explicitly painted inlay flowers, and that's appear from within. Carved dead, gold in the shake, and overturned switch, and again. More than 5,000 when they entered the light. Carter's brief of 1923 notes that he left for Cairo the illness was by any mosquito cheek. Next day, 1923 notes that he left for Cairo the illness to describe Carter ill with an acute attack of blood poison. Carter ill with an acute attack of blood poison. Developed pneumonia, died in the continentals of water months of museum Philadelphia. When you think of Egyptians, you not only bodies, but foodstuffs, meats, vegetables, those things. The raw material would be there. Thousands of years ago, reasonable studies. Could be finished with radioactive rock. In 1990, it was discovered so it has generated deep interest, debate, and controversy. The big issues in identifying IP50 APAB research centers is legally a fine image of this arrow, and things like how our tomb is just meters from Tutankhamun's tomb. Upon excavation, my EV55 disintegrated into bones. So today, the size somersault in 2010 is an archaeological research, including some artifacts suggests that EV5 is Arcanata. Size somersault in 2010 is an archaeological research, including some artifacts suggests that EV5 is Arcanata. suggests that 55 is Arcanata. Suggests that 55 is Arcanata. Arcanata 53 BC is known as heretic because he developed mafia worshipping the one part of the who is believed to have died in his early 20s. Some scholars argue that mummy KV-55's age demonstrate that this is actually enigmatic late Armor period person in the 20s. Some scholars argue that mummy KV-55's age demonstrate that this is actually enigmatic late Armor period person named Smare person named Smare FAPAB person named Smare FAPAB new facial recognition of the KV-55 mummy, which was complete with the words of who recognized facial reconstructions. Dr. Michael, who is also an archaeology Egyptologist and senior research fellow at Flinders University, Australia, told us about the new facial recognition and research on the mysteries surrounding KV-5. So, when asked about the process used to create this facial reconstruction, Dr. Michael said that based on published data and images for this study, 5 was created. This was again against the images, facial muscle size, fat skin, and now modeled on this digital 5 was created. This was again against the images, facial muscle size, fat skin, and now modeled on this digital soul model. Using the so-called Manchester method. The thickness is determined for numerous anatomical points based on this digital soul model. Using the so-called Manchester method. The thickness is determined for numerous anatomical points based on this reconstruction of no Egyptian crown due to distort the impression. Therefore, Michael, we think that the reconstruction is as objective as possible and follows purely scientific methods. However, there is a lot of controversy surrounding the skin colour of ancient Egyptians. How they decided to choose a skin colour for this reconstruction? The reconstruction is as objective as possible and follows purely scientific methods. However, there is a lot of controversy surrounding the skin colour of ancient Egyptians. How they decided to choose a skin colour for this reconstruction? Michael said that they decided to use skin tone 4 in the Fitzpatrick scale of 1 to 6, which is typically encountered in Egypt and the Mediterranean olive complexion. So therefore, it's difficult to pinpoint the age of death for this mummy. Well, Dr. Michael says that it wasn't particularly difficult. He said the comprehensive study by the late archaeologist used it required an objective evaluation using all available state districts and a consultation of the recent anthropological literature. The main problem was the priori identification identification when Akhenaten plus study by the psychologist used to it required an objective evaluation of all available state districts and a consultation of the recent anthropological literature. The main problem was prior identification when Akhenaten plus the assumed age of the recent anthropological literature. The main problem was prior identification when Akhenaten at 19 to 22 years. At 19 to 22 years. So some is controversy surrounding identification. Who does Dr. Michael think is the best candidate? Is Tutankhamun's father Michael think is the best candidate? Is Tutankhamun's father? Is Tutankhamun's father Akhenaten? And if so, how does that information fit with the belief that is that Kerr 4 years of age, and this mummy is younger, or could the mummy reigns of the enigmatic figure called Sokar, as some scholars have posed? Well, the answer is most reasonable to assume that Akhenaten and Nefertiti are the historic parents of Tutankhamun due to historic scriptures. If one accepts the genetic study 2010, KV5 shall be the father, and the younger lady KV35 as the genetic mother of Tutankhamun. His records testify 70 years of reign by Akhenaten. It's at the time of action. It would hardly be arguable that Akhenaten could be the real father of the eldest daughters. The mummies of these daughters have been identified. Amenhotep III could be the father. At the time of action. It would hardly be arguable that Akhenaten could be the real father of the eldest daughters. The mummies of these daughters have been identified. Amenhotep III could be the father, contrary to inscription and propaganda. These daughters have been identified. Amenhotep III could be the father, contrary to inscription and propaganda. Since Tutankhamun was only born in the 12th year, it's still possible that Akhenaten was the real father, even if he was very young. If Tutankhamun is assumed to be the Tutankhamun, since Tutankhamun was only born in the 12th year, it's still possible that Akhenaten was the real father, even if he was very young. If Tutankhamun is assumed to be the Tutankhamun, this is also wrong. If Tutankhamun is assumed to be the Tutankhamun, this is also problematic. There is no historical evidence that he was the younger brother of Akhenaten. Moreover, experts argue that Sokar is in fact the fictitious figure, ancient representative of the heretic pharaohs. Could this be due to the kind of art that was used by Akhenaten? To Michael says, it turns out that Egyptian art is generally not very realistic, but it's an ideal image, especially in the case of in the Amarna period, especially in the case of in the Amarna period, a grotesque comic-like sense of art was produced. In the course of time, art became more moderate, elegant in the famous Berlin bust of Nefertiti.
The archaeology made by the restoration because we miss also there was that result of this still show due to the painting very close
it's said that in its splendor it was painted as some with a few dresses which would allow the casket of Tutankhamun. The Sphinx measures approximately 8 meters in length with a 3-meter tail. According to official Egyptologists, it was sculpted in the 26th century CE, and with this we have our first mystery. What is the true age of Sphinx? If we accept the current theory of official Egyptologists, then the Sphinx is around 4,600 years old. This, of course, would make it older than the pyramids themselves. There is, of course, another theory that suggests that the pyramids are older, and fall in line with the dating of the Sphinx.
Although prevalent by Egyptian and later Mesopotamian mythology, the classical Greek depiction of the Sphinx consists of a head of a woman and the wings of a bird. Giza's male identifying landmark is technically an androsphinx. The Great Sphinx of Giza is such a marvellous piece of work that it's surprisingly nobody bothered to take credit. Even now, without definition and defining evidence of the statue's age, modern archaeologists split which ancient Egyptian pharaoh allegedly created the landmark. Defining evidence of the statue's age, modern archaeologists split which ancient Egyptian pharaoh allegedly created the landmark. A number of evidence suggest that the Sphinx was originally intended to be even greater. Defining evidence of the statue's age, modern archaeologists split which ancient Egyptian pharaoh allegedly created the landmark. A number of evidence suggest that the Sphinx was originally intended to be even greater than what we see today. Archaeologists discovered large stone blocks.
Swiffer Vermont has hundreds of strips, scrub away stick messes even from
Benadryl allergy liquid.
100 strips, scrub away stick messes even from
Benadryl allergy liquid. Allergy relief in a wild cherry flavor. Bring it.
100 strips, scrub away stick messes even from
Benadryl allergy liquid. Allergy relief in a wild cherry flavor. Bring it.
There's nothing day on the floor. The preparation, the expectation, the moment of... Don't let a bad battery keep you landlocked. The power, performance, and reliability of Superstar keep you on time and time again. Got Riley Auto Parts. Don't let a bad battery keep you landlocked. The power, performance, and reliability of Superstar keep you on time and time again. Got Riley Auto Parts. Time and time again. Got Riley Auto Parts.
By a Genoese and Navy captain, Giovanni Battista Capia. He was the first to end the idea that the face of Sphinx belonged to Kefren himself. 880 by a Genoese and Navy captain, Giovanni Battista Capia. He was the first to end the idea that the face of Sphinx belonged to Kefren himself. The Sphinx belonged to Kefren himself. The living image of the beast given that Kefren represents just 2 years for Vigia to dig Sphinx from the same. During this time, it was already missing. God was rather creative and not so objective. This information was circulated. We often think of the Sphinx embedded in our memory for 100 years. His head into his face. That is to say, that the Sphinx would in reality be the largest and newest object in the world. His head into his face. That is to say, that the Sphinx would in reality be the largest and newest object in the world. Another question to arise is when you study the Sphinx, the largest and newest object in the world. Another question to arise is when you study the Sphinx, the largest and newest object in the world. Another question to arise is when you